Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. The news is rolling in across the college football landscape in a number of ways. Just here in the last couple days, we've learned that the great USC running back Charles White has passed away at the age of 64. So our condolences go out to the Charles White family, friends, loved ones. Charles White won the 1979 Heisman Trophy and accumulated one of the greatest careers in USC history at running back. And let's understand that USC has delivered probably the greatest stable of running backs in the history of college football. And Charles White is right near the top of that list. And most famously known for leading the USC scoring march in the final 2 minutes of the 1980 Rose Bowl against a number one Ohio State team, gaining 71 of 83 yards on that rushing drive and catapulting himself over the top with about a minute and change left in the 1980 Rose Bowl to lead USC to a win over Ohio State that knocked the Buckeyes out of the national championship. USC did have one tie, therefore they were denied a national championship that year, but Charles White played on national championship teams, I believe 3 Rose Bowl winning teams for USC. So we pay our respects to Charles White. And again, our condolences go out to his family. Our guys on the Clemson channel meeting Paul Craven and also Jordan Bowman are going live tonight. I don't know if they're still on yet, but please check out their work as they went live tonight on the Clemson channel. Dabo Swinney has made a bold move. Dabo Swinney has said goodbye to his newly named offensive coordinator, who lasted just the one season after Tony Elliott left for Virginia to take over the head coaching ranks there. Brandon Streeter let go after one season as Clemson offensive coordinator in favor of a name that's very hot in college football right now, despite what happened in the national championship game on Monday night, and that's when Garrett Riley, younger brother of Lincoln Riley, who headed up the TCU offense this season, he has now made his way to Clemson. We learned that Derek Mason, defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State, of course, former head coach at Vandy, former DC at Stanford, he has decided to leave football for the time being. I haven't looked into what is being stated there in regards to his own well-being and mental health, or what is involved there, possibly a situation with his family. But Derek Mason, Oklahoma State, he has stepped away from football. Interesting to learn that while much of the speculation concerning the Denver Broncos' pursuit of a college coach has fluctuated and surrounded one Jim Harbaugh of Michigan, reported by ESPN and others today is that David Shaw, Stanford head coach, who seemed a bit burned out by the thought of continuing as a head football coach, but that may be just as a college head football coach, because he is interested enough to listen to the Denver Broncos. David Shaw is interviewing with the Broncos. And there's all sorts of other news and notes out there. So we will open up the phone lines. And first and foremost, we believe that the most prominent of the stories on this day is that Kevin Warren is going back to the NFL. Kevin Warren, Big Ten commissioner since the summer of 2019. Before we take our first call, let me just outline Kevin Warren's tenure with the Big Ten. I was not impressed with Kevin Warren and his decision-making and his leadership, or lack thereof, in the fall of 2020. Kevin Warren was foolish to publicly announce a decision not to play football before he had fully gathered the vibe, gathered the temperature of the room within the Big Ten on all levels. He simply knew what administrators wanted, what the academia wanted in the Big Ten, and was set on his heels by the pandemic and thought, okay, the administrators, the presidents, academia is telling me we can't play football. It's too dangerous. And this pandemic is overtaking the country. So he made an abrupt and ill-advised announcement that he had to backpedal on. Now, he wisely didn't stick to his guns, but when players, coaches, former players, media, fans, and students at the schools all got together, when all those factions were put together and their wants and desires for a football season, and Kevin Warren then was able to take into consideration the plans that have been put in place, most notably by the SEC, and some of the safeguards that it would be possible to go forward with a football season. He retracted on what he had earlier stated. So basically, Kevin Warren botched the pandemic. I will give him a break because that was unprecedented. What we all faced in the fall of 2020, before that and after that, but speaking to the football season of 2020, what we all faced with the pandemic was unprecedented. And I can give him a bit of a pass, but he hopefully has learned from that. His two major moves, what he is going to be remembered for most, I would have told you 2 years ago, it would be what I just outlined in his mishandling of the pandemic and the 2020 football season, has been far surpassed by two lasting commitments that he has been able to take on, and two major pluses for the Big Ten, two major additions, two major contract agreements. The first and foremost one being in the face of Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, and the SEC widening the gap over the Big Ten and the rest of college football. Kevin Warren was bold and went to the West Coast, and he lured USC and UCLA. How much credit we can give him for that, I don't know, because I don't know the inner workings, but he's the one responsible. So when you're the man in charge, when you're the person in charge, then you're going to take the credit for the victories and you're going to take the hits for the losses. So I'm sure he had a ton of help. I know that there were thoughts prior to Kevin Warren coming on board. So he is not the originator of that thought. He is not the visionary of that idea of expanding the Big Ten. That did not come from him. However, he executed. He went out there, he made it happen. So he looked at the face of the Big Ten's biggest partner and closest partner, the Pac-12, and he still made the move to go get USC, UCLA. Big plus, big move, feather in his hat. And then, of course, the TV deal, the rights deal, the media rights deal. You can no longer call these television deals per se, even though it still starts with TV. With NBC, CBS, and Fox, and a breaking away from ESPN and establishing that the Big Ten footprint on television, on media, will extend throughout the day from noon Eastern time all the way through until there is football played. The Big Ten will be on television, will be on the internet throughout every Saturday from coast to coast, and will fill up all the time zones. So Kevin Warren made those two accomplishments and made them happen for this conference before he is now moving on to become, I believe, president of the Chicago Bears, and that takes effect in April. All right, we will go to our first call of the night. Let's see, we've got Hunter on the line. Hunter, how you doing?
Good, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
First, I want to say condolences to you and your family. I heard about your mother passing away, and my condolences out to you and your family.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Um, so yeah, that's interesting. With him leaving like that. I don't know, what you can contribute, like you said, to him getting those moved from UCLA and USC. How much do you think he really had to do with that?
Well, I think the timing was right. Excuse me. I think that the timing was right, and I think that it made it easier on him based on what the SEC had already done the previous summer. And so it makes it look more like a counter move, and he looks less like a villain in making that move. But I know that, as I stated, that there were talks out there about the Big Ten expanding in various, and we continue to talk about how the Big Ten and the SEC can expand, even though those talks have cooled. Uh, we still discuss whether that's Miami and Florida State or North Carolina, or in what direction that goes for either conference. But he's not he's not the visionary or the originator of that idea, but he's the guy that orchestrated the whole thing. And if anybody has any doubts about his ability to lead, it's not completely easy to pull together uh, a media rights deal either that's fair and involves three different partners. So that's the thing, is that most of these conferences have dealt exclusively with ESPN, uh, and signed their rights exclusively, let's say ESPN, and then they've got a separate Fox deal for those conferences that have Fox on board, the Big 12 and the Pac 12. But he was able to package it all together and make it kind of like an NFL rights deal. So give him a lot of credit for that, because that gets complicated when you have multiple media partners at the same time that you're dealing with, and you're coordinating it for the benefit of your conference all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Did you also see that they're making the restrictions to the transfer rules now? I've seen an article about that today, where they are making some changes in regards to waivers.
I did not see that. So what is the restriction?
Um, so the restriction is waivers will be denied unless there is provable um, injuries or medical related things. Um, and so basically, it's going to make it to where a kid just can't request a waiver just because he's not getting playing time.
Well, if what I'm hearing is accurate, then that's going to completely alter the transfer portal, and I can't believe that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen it on my Facebook feed and pulled up the article, but I can't remember what website it was on. So maybe you can find it.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't. Well, there's a story that was published today by 247 Sports. NCAA changes transfer rules. Players entering transfer portal for second time
Oh,
subject to
second time.
stricter eligibility waivers. Okay, that's
Yeah,
key. Second
yeah,
time. Okay.
yeah,
So one
yeah. Because you
time,
got that,
no questions
you got that one
asked,
train. Yeah,
and then
and
the
then the
second
second
time.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that's that. I think that is reasonable. I
I
think
think it
that
is too.
um, I think that'll cut back on some of this transfer portal hiatus that we're seeing today.
Oh, it will. Yes, it will. A ton of the guys that we see every day enter the transfer portal. it's a second go around or a third go around, and that's going to put restrictions on it right there.
Yeah, let me ask you about this theory that I've heard, and I want to get your perspective on it. Somebody has said that some guys will put their name in the pool just to see if there's a better NIL deal available to them, and that they're just hearing out other programs. And if that is the case, do you think there should be restrictions on that?
To answer the first part of your question, absolutely, I believe that. And number two, should there be restrictions? Yes, there should be restrictions. But before we can get to that point, we just need to put restrictions on, or the restrictions are there, they're just not enforced, of how the players, the student athletes, are offered NIL collective money and contracts as a first step into college. So before we get that cleared up and cleaned up, I'm not even as concerned about the NIL money alluring players that are already in college football.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there has to be something done to where there has to be some protection mechanism or system in place to protect these kids from agents that are going to essentially just rip them off. And I don't know what that looks like, but I think these kids that are 18, 19 years old shouldn't be taken advantage of um, because of their just because of their status and being how they're regarded kids out of high school or freshmen in college.
Yeah, it's a
And so
mess. I don't know that we're
I
going to get a handle on that part of it because it's so difficult to. It's almost like tampering. Uh, there's an issue with tampering as well, and all you have to do to get around technically tampering is to have teammates or players on the team contact uh, other players from other teams, and you get around that, but it's still tampering.
yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people who try to find a loophole in the system, uh, but I think there just needs to be some sort of a system in place to mitigate that. So that's just one of those things. But I am glad to see that happening with the second time transfers. I think that's crucial, and I'm glad that's going to be going to happen here. Mark, I hadn't talked to you since the national championship game, so um, congrats to Georgia. I mean, um, you hear some of these rhetoric, from people, um, you know, from other fan bases saying that the Alabama's dynasty is dead and all this type of rhetoric, and yeah, that's a little aggravating, but look, winning two back-to-back national championships is not easy. I think the only three teams to ever do it is Nebraska, Georgia, and Alabama, if I'm not mistaken.
To win back to back since like 1980. USC, depending on how you count them, they have back to back championships in 03, 04.
Okay, okay, yeah, I didn't know. I knew that it was something like that. I didn't know there's not many teams that are able to do that, but especially in this modern era, I mean that's a pretty big accomplishment. So, um, I didn't think that would be a game. I kind of expected that game to play out just kind of like it did. I mean, I, I thought the Georgia was just going to run straight, you know, straight over them. So, and I'm not disappointed as an Alabama fan. Some people say that this season for Alabama was a letdown. But winning 10 games for most programs would be considered a success. Would be a very successful year. And for us to win 10 games and go to and play in a bowl game against a pretty good Kansas State team. I mean, they weren't elite, but they were a good football team. So, um, but I'm looking forward to next year and seeing what next year's team brings.
Yeah. The early forecast for next year has the same players and the same teams in place. I think if we are looking for maybe some fresh blood, then we're looking at Florida State and we're looking at possibly Penn State and we're looking at USC.
I really like what Florida State is going to be. What I think Florida State is going to be like next year. I think he's done a remarkable job. Norvell's done a remarkable job of recruiting there and recruiting the portal to make his to make that team even bring some more experience to some of the positions that we need the experience at. Um, I think Florida State could be a playoff team next year.
Oh, I think they could too. Yeah, I think that without proving it on the field, that I tend to lean for Florida State over Clemson right now.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think do you think Bill O'Brien's going to leave Alabama for an NFL job? I hope so.
I got to think that Bill O'Brien, like most coaches, wants to run his own deal. So I don't know if he's going to get hired um, as an NFL head coach or he's going to see an NFL coordinator position to be a stepping stone to get him back in position to get another shot as a head coach.
I just can't take another year watching that offense that he calls. I just it, it was so. The best way I can describe it is just stale. It was just not exciting, nothing extravagant. And I gotta give hats off to him. He did play a good call a good game against Kansas State. I gotta give him credit where credit's due there. I thought some of the play calling was a little bit more dynamic than what we've seen uh, previous. So um, I just think we got to make a change there. I mean, I think Nick Saban knows that, and I think after the NFL season, I think some opportunities will rise up for Bill O'Brien and him and Alabama will just you know just have a mutual parting of ways, I guess.
All right, Hunter. Appreciate you being here.
All right, thank you, Mark.
All right. We appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Yakov 22, thank you so much for your contribution tonight. Mark, for the next Big Ten commissioner, I am not waiting for the phone call to be made. That isn't necessarily going to happen, but wouldn't that be a fun challenge? Wouldn't that be a fun challenge? Erica, thank you so much for your contribution. I appreciate your kind words. I didn't know about your mom's passing, Mark. I'm very sad or very sorry to hear that, and we'll be thinking of you and yours. Thank you for that, Erica. I appreciate that. I will just make this brief. I'll just state that if anything, most of the grieving and mourning has been going on for the last 6 months, and a few of you know that. So there's been a lot of that over the last 6 months as she has unfortunately suffered, and I have had the honor and the privilege to move closer to her and be here to help and support for the last 6 months or so. But she's in a better place now, and it's nice to know that she is in fact doing much better today than she was yesterday. But thank you so much for that, Erica. I appreciate that. Alan, welcome into the Voice of College Football.
Hey, bro, that's a long time. Long time.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Well, I want to talk about two things real quick. Yep. I am so glad Warren's gone. He was a disaster. I'm sorry. We talked about this before, and the way he handled that whole COVID thing, you hit on it perfectly. I mean, when we were trying, us and Ohio State, your team, and Iowa were trying to get a schedule together, he was threatening all of us to throw us out, get out of it.
Yes.
It was just poorly handled, just a disaster.
Alan, this is one of those topics that I really need to keep a catalog of notes because at the time I built up an entire checklist of, internally between my two ears, a checklist of ways in which he botched that situation. And now that it's been over 2 years ago, I'm losing much of that recollection of most of it. But it certainly started and ended with him jumping the gun way prematurely and not getting the lay of the land, not talking to coaches and players, not talking to the fans, not talking to students, not getting the proper level of feedback. And apparently, this seems ludicrous, not talking to the other conference commissioners to know how they saw it and what they had in play and how they were going to execute pulling off their seasons.
Right. And I'm going to give big credit to the Ohio State AD. She really stepped in and fought for us because he was ready to throw us out. And I was reading the stuff out of Lincoln, and there were other teams who were saying, no, get rid of Nebraska. But it was interesting when all this was going on, Nick Saban came out and said, we'll take him to the SEC West. And thinking about that now is like, wow, wish you would have jumped. That would have been a perfect time to do it. But that's neither here nor there, but it's kind of funny. The second thing I'd like to jump to is, do we have any idea who's taking over his spot? Is there any idea that you know who's going to come in?
I saw a long list of candidates listed by a particular site. Excuse me. There were only 2 or 3 names that were familiar, but they came from all different areas, as you could imagine. One was a conference commissioner, the former ACC conference commissioner, Jim Phillips. I would like to know what he's accomplished in the ACC that would make him an impressive candidate, because I'm not all about just, okay, if you've held the job before, then you know what you're doing. The WNBA commissioner was listed, all sorts of various people in the NFL, those sorts of one of the head honchos at Fox Sports, those sorts of people.
All right. Last thing, because you get a lot of people. Us picking up Walter Rouse yesterday, Nebraska. Yep. I'm a Nebraska fan, everybody. So there you go. That was unbelievably huge. Whatever side of the fence he sits, I don't know if he's left tackle or right, I don't remember. But we needed that. You know how bad our offensive line was last year. And having him and the center we picked up from Arizona State and the other guard we picked up, it'll help us out tremendously. It'll be a change in our team for offense line.
Well, I will have to plead ignorance there, Alan. So thanks for letting me know, because, excuse me, if anything, I've been out of it. And the last I knew about Rouse is we did an Oklahoma show on Wednesday morning, and also the Nebraska show on Tuesday night, and we talked about Rouse, and also Iowa was in the running. Kind of interesting,
right?
That we
all
had
3
of those shows, all 3,
yeah.
And we talked about him, but I didn't know that that he had decided.
It was NIL. That's exactly what brought him. You were talking about it earlier, but that's exactly why Nebraska got him. They just wrote a bigger check. Sorry.
Well, I hate that we're in a place in college football where that should be our first, not assumption, but it should certainly not surprise anyone if that turns
No.
out to be the case, and will most of the time. It's just like an NFL free agent, Major League Baseball free agent, NBA free agent. Who did they sign with? 90 some percent of the time they signed with the club that gave them the most money.
I would feel bad. I said it in Discord. I feel bad. My condolences to you. I have one other question. What is your thoughts of Matt Rule?
I think Matt Rule is a really good football coach. I think that Matt Rule, what he did both at Baylor and Temple, are classic program building moves in a short period of time with steady or explosive growth and improvement each one of the seasons in which he led the football program, step by step by step, and he's done it twice.
All right, sir. Well, have a great evening. I hope you get to feeling better. And hello, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it. Have a good night. All right, DeAndre, we apologize because I had a double click there and brought you on for a split second, but now you're on. DeAndre, how you doing tonight? Hello, DeAndre. Going once, going twice, DeAndre. We will try back later. All right, let's go to David. David, how you doing tonight?
Hello, Mark. My condolences on your loss.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been through that before. So wish you the best, my friend, to you and your family.
Thank you.
Want to talk about the situation with Kevin Warren. Obviously, from a Buckeye standpoint, not a whole lot love lost on the way the COVID situation was handled. But I think that we have to also look at the Big Ten presidents at that particular period of time who were not keen on playing football over that particular season. I do give a lot of credit for Nebraska, helping us, to the previous caller, to try to get a season moved along that year. We had talked. I remember we had numerous conversations at that time, Mark. We were kind of seeing, where football was mattering and where it wasn't mattering in certain parts of the country. Because if you remember, we were talking about how, the Pac-10 didn't want to move on with football that year. And neither, if I'm mistaken, didn't the Big 12 get a late start that year as well, Mark?
Yeah. The SEC, and it's not surprising, the SEC seemed to know exactly what it wanted right out of the gate. The ACC was right there with them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The ACC got off in time, I think, too.
Yeah, and it was the Big 12 that was a couple weeks late. But yeah, they were right there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing that stirs the pot, I've heard this offered up in the chat, and you may have mentioned it at the time, Mark, is remember I believe his son was playing at Mississippi or Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And then he's out there saying things about, the uncertainty and the safety and, not playing football all the same time, his son's playing football. So I'm sure he had, I mean, when you think about it from a look standpoint, I mean, you tell me, Mark.
Yeah. See, you have to know that when you're in that position in this day and age, everyone is going to find out anything about you and your family or the decisions you've made or the statements you've made. And this is not a difficult connection to make. If Kevin Warren's son is on the roster of an SEC football team, Mississippi State, and if he truly believed what he was stating, then would you not prohibit your child from participating in a dangerous situation?
Yeah, if you're out there saying on Big Ten Network that this is just too risky and, we're not prepared to, and then yet later in the year, they try to put together kind of basically a half-ass season. And we had how many games, canceled that year and everything like that. I mean, it was chaotic to say the least, right, Mark?
Yeah, it was the shoddiest of the seasons outside of the Pac-12. The Pac-12 even had a worse excuse of a season with some teams playing 4 games. But the Big Ten wasn't far behind with, its 5 and 6 game seasons.
Right, right. It was, yeah, it was just basically trial by error that year. And the stadiums and having fans or even having family in the stands, things like that. It was, well, at least we don't have to live that situation. Well, hopefully never again. That's for sure. I did want to say, he actually, I was a little surprised 3 years, Mark. That's, as a commissioner. We
Yeah.
don't see a lot of we see a lot of commissioners serve a longer term than 3
Hmm.
years, I would think.
Yeah. Now, maybe if you're the commissioner of the Sun Belt Conference and you're looking for upward mobility, that's one thing. But you would expect, and this can't be foreseen exactly, but again, anytime you're in the hiring process, if you are charged with hiring um, a major, major leadership role like that, I would think that you would want to really delve into that person's psyche and their goals and aspirations to see if they are going to be in for the long haul. You don't have to have the next Jim Delaney sign up for decades, but yeah, that's not ideal to have because the transition periods are lost time. There is money lost, there is direction lost.
Right.
There all those things are lost anytime you have a direct transition in leadership. There's time and there are drawbacks to that.
Yeah, wouldn't you say that you'd think that the Big Ten presidents might have done a little bit better, vetting or, as far as that, you would think. Yeah.
The figure that surprised me as I looked at some of this a few minutes before we started was that 12 of the 14 Big Ten presidents
Mm.
are different today than they were when he took the job
Right.
or during the fall of the pandemic. So this is only a little over 2 years ago. You would think that lofty a position would be more stable as well.
I don't know. I've seen some movement with presidents over the years at some of these universities. Yeah, it seems a little bit more transit than one might think. I don't know. Maybe certain universities keep their presidents longer than others. I don't know. I would say, Mark, from a dollars and cents standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong. The Big Ten profitability is it as strong, if not stronger, than the SEC, if I'm not mistaken, right?
The last season I looked at, and that was a third consecutive year that the Big Ten edged the SEC in football revenue per school and also at the gate slightly, which is somewhat surprising.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that Warren, was you mentioned Jim Delaney earlier, Mark. I think he was obviously left kind of, really in a good kind of situation. You can look at kind of the NFL and kind of comparison. I always thought Tagliabue was left a great situation, obviously by Pete Rozelle. Tagliabue left it what I thought was a good situation for Roger Goodell, although I'm not a big Roger Goodell fan. But I mean, everything as far as the conference and where the conference is at. When you look about expanding the conference, when you look at the Big Ten network, when you look at the Big Ten championship game, was all achieved under the Delaney, era.
Well, as I mentioned to an earlier caller, I am impressed by the the scope of the media rights deal. Not that they just re-signed with ESPN and it was $6 billion for 6 years or whatever it was. I believe this is 7 years, 7 billion.
Right.
But the multi-layer aspect of this deal that is going to involve all these media outlets uh, and really encompasses everybody that's a player outside of ESPN. So he basically took what was a broken relationship with ESPN and a broken negotiation, and then he supplemented that with all these different brands and getting the Big Ten on all these different brands, major brands. And now with USC, UCLA, and covering the entire day of college football with Big Ten football, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Delaney certainly righted the ship and put it in the right direction. So what Warren was inheriting wasn't a really good spot. I will say this. I mean, do we have to? I guess Warren's lasting mark would be getting the expansion and getting USC and UCLA. Is that going to be, when we come to right?
Yeah, media rights are going to come and go, but I do think that that's a groundbreaking media rights deal. But that is secondary to, USC, UCLA. I think that, the Big Ten, for as much as neither one of us and other Big Ten fans, and rightfully so, um, heavily criticize his handling. Uh, and it looked like that stigma may stay with the Big Ten. It obviously did not. So
Right.
that's one thing that many of us forecasted or were concerned about, the Big Ten taking a backseat to the other conferences, and that there being some kind of lasting impact there. And there's nothing lasting there. So he mismanaged the situation, but he got away with it, and the league was able to recover quickly. And then he's got the two coups, and that's USC, UCLA, and the media rights deal on multi platforms.
I would add that, as far as that situation goes, and you got to give it credit because the SEC made their power move with Texas and with Oklahoma, and that left the Big Ten in no other position to go out and make their own power move. And kudos for trying to do so. That's why I was trying to say when we last talked about where these 2024, once these conferences get these two power programs, you know how much more they distance themselves from the other conferences.
And it was also an unconventional addition. It wasn't within that scope of schools or group of schools that most people guessed.
Yeah. You got to go out and get a West Coast presence like that. Let me put it out there though, too, Mark. I mean, see, I think the trajectory of the Big Ten is obviously in a much, much better place than let's say if we compared the Big Ten to where it was at 10 years ago, just to use an even year sample size. So the Big Ten 2012 compared to the Big Ten 2022. I mean, as far as coaches, as far as where the programs are at, the trajectory of these programs in college football, I think the Big Ten is a much stronger conference than it was 10 years ago, especially when it comes to coaching and the level of play on the football field. I know the SEC still wins the national championship. We get all that. But I still think the conference has made big time ground within the last 10 years.
I'm going to largely agree with you, but I'm going to disagree with you in this way.
Go ahead.
Everything you just stated, I completely agree with. The from a business standpoint, from a monetary standpoint, and logistically in every business oriented way, the Big Ten has been run well and has made wise decisions and unexpectedly forward thinking decisions most recently. However, I would have expected the football results to be better in light of all that.
You're talking, more wins in the non-conference, bowl wins, things of that nature, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I get that. I get that. I mean, we talked about this past bowl season here the last time we chatted, but I would say that I just think that the programs are on better footing than they were at that particular period of time. Now, obviously, they've got to do it non-conference and with scheduling and playing better teams in non-conference, and they obviously have to achieve it in bowl season. I get all that. Believe you me, as an Ohio State fan, nothing gets me more than the loss that happened on New Year's Eve. But yeah, I know that's all you can do. But we've covered that ground. But
I will say it like this to everyone. And David, you can close your ears because you've already heard this, I'm sure. But
la 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 la.
it it hurts in the
Already
moment
covered it.
because you watch your favorite team and you see them perform and execute, and you know that they're playing the best, and they stood toe to toe, and all of that.
Right.
The recurring pain is going to come at other times this offseason. It's going to come next offseason. It's just going to continue because, again, we're not talking about Michigan State making the playoff. We're not talking about Washington making the playoff and it being an aberration. We're talking about Ohio State when the arguments ensue among college football elite fan bases about championships, about CFP record,
Sure. Yeah, I get
all
it.
that, and it adds up.
I feel you. Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, and the crazy thing about it was this year, Mark, like I told you, I think this is a really flawed Ohio State team,
Mm-hmm.
and they just they came within 1 point of beating a Georgia team on their own home field that
They would
went
be
on
the national
undefeated.
champions.
Right, and I like if I was ranking this Ohio State team within the last 10 to 15 years, I'd rank 7 or 8 Ohio State teams maybe higher. That this was a
I
flawed
would too.
team.
Yeah.
And they came within a field goal of beating an undefeated Georgia team that won the national title that everybody said is now running college football, including David Pollock. David Pollock said it to Nick Saban. Did you get anything out of that comment,
You know
Mark?
what that reminded me of? It reminded me of Urban Meyer sitting at the same desk at the BCS championship game of 2012/13, Alabama Notre Dame,
Yeah.
and David Pollock. Urban was funny that year because he continually did not want to give that team too much credit because the season was still in play. So of
Yeah.
course he didn't want them to get swelled heads and
Sure.
not and look past their next opponent. But once they completed the season, I still remember Quinn Kesnick probably was the sideline reporter at the Ohio State Michigan game, and as soon as they won, he said to Urban Meyer, he said, Coach, you've been saying after every game this season, this is not a great football team. This is not a great football team. It's just, a bunch of scrappers. It's not a great team. It's not a great team. And Urban Meyer interrupts him and says, this is a great team. This is an all-time great Ohio State football team. And of course, he could say that then. He could then, because they weren't going to be challenged anymore. They were done. And so then at the national championship game, David Pollock made some kind of comment about, if Ohio State was in this situation and Urban Meyer was sitting right there, just that this Alabama team was just running the sport and nobody could challenge them and they would lay waste to anyone. And, there was this look just between David Pollock and Urban Meyer that was
Yeah.
priceless.
Well, I think he always felt like a lot of us that the 2015 team was supposed to be the team that was supposed to be ahead of the game, But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting time in college football. By the way, did you not do your little show with our buddy Mr. Dace today? Was that did that to be moved or something?
We did not do that today, and I apologize to everyone. We are attempting to do that every Thursday, but that's my issue with the family situation, and
Understood.
I also got hit with COVID this week. So for about 4 days, I felt like somebody slammed my head in a wall and or
Not good.
backed up a Mack truck over me. So I'm feeling much better now.
I was going to say you sound much better there, my friend. Well, as always, it's a pleasure to talk college football with you, Mark.
Thank you, David. We appreciate you being here.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
All right. We appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much for all the kind words and so forth. We'll go to our next caller on the line. We got Yakov here. Hey, Yakov.
Hi, Mark. Good evening.
Good evening.
I appreciate you having me on and reading my little super chat there. Obviously, said that in jest, although I do think that you would do a fine job if called upon.
Well, the one thing I will say for myself is I would know enough to surround myself with excellent people.
That even the president of the United States could do that type of thing. You can't be an expert on everything. So
You can't.
yeah. So if you did that, Mark, you'd be a successful commissioner. First of all, Mark, I'll say real fast. I've obviously I don't know you personally, but I certainly know a lot about you, interacting and watching your show. And one thing I know for sure is you're an excellent son.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're an excellent son. And I'm quite sure that your mother was very proud to call you her son. So on a far less important note, that's the important thing. But on a less important note, I actually wanted to bring up a thought, Mark. Now we're in the off season, so we don't have to talk about the games anymore. And I actually this came to my attention in regards to the in 2 years we're going to have expanded playoffs, and one of the things, I guess perhaps subject to change, but currently they're saying that the top 4 conference champions will be the top 4 seeds and will earn buys. And I don't know if you know this, Mark, but this year the first 2 would have been the same, but number 3 and number 4 would have been Clemson. I don't know if you mentioned this, but I didn't hear it on your show, but I heard this. Actually, I heard about Clay Travis talking about that. Clemson would have been 3 and Kansas State would have been 4, earning them buys. And I think nobody thinks they're the 3rd and 4th best team in the country. And I'd like to hope, Mark, that they may reconsider that, because that seems, sure, everyone else has their shot, but there's a significant advantage to only having to play. What is it going to be? 2 games now instead of 3? 3 instead of 4? And I think that needs some serious reconsideration.
So your point is extremely valid. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. So I will put that in the category of I understand your point, and it's not that it's off the wall in any such way. However, what would you use to determine those 4 slots?
Mark, I guess I'm still satisfied with the current situation. That I don't think anyone really had a problem. No, not as far as only having 4 teams, but I probably would have had the 4 that were there this year. I probably would have gone with that.
So you would have the committee select the 4 seeds, the 4 buys.
A lot of those teams are probably going to be conference champs anyway. Not necessarily, but I'm sure at least half of them always will be anyway. But you could be a conference champ with 3 losses, or you could lose. In theory, you could lose 3 non-conference games and go undefeated in the conference, or perhaps even lose one conference. You could lose 4 games and still be a conference champ. So we have to be careful what that means to be a conference champ. But this year would have been a 2 and 3 loss team. So I didn't. I didn't actually have an argument back to this, Mark, because I have to admit I thought you were going to run with it and agree with me. So admittedly, I haven't. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling for words here, because I thought I was going to move on to another topic after receiving your agreement. But that's fine that I didn't.
For me to agree with you, Yakov, I would need to go through each and every season and determine what that 12-team playoff would look like, and if I felt as though there is an inconsistency or injustice in the teams that receive the buys on a fairly regular basis. See, here's the issue is that now that the playoff is being expanded to 12 teams, we have to do one of 2 things with conference championships. We either need to disband them and get rid of them because they don't mean what they used to mean, or we need to give incentive to conference championships. And that's what this playoff committee has opted to do, is to incentivize the conference championships. Because look at this season, for instance, Yakov. If we were in a 12-team playoff, and even in the 4-team playoff, had Georgia lost the SEC championship game and Michigan lost the Big Ten championship game, we would have had no conference champions go to the playoff. They would have all been those games were not meaningful. Right. The SEC and the Big Ten could have been won by the other team, and the other team still was clear and safe. Clemson couldn't get in, Kansas State couldn't get in, and Utah could not get in. So we had 5 conference championship games that were meaningless.
No, they might have in the new format. They might have gotten in as at-large teams, but nevertheless, you make a good point, Mark. And you can see I didn't think this through, Mark, because I just went with what he said. I read I heard like a 2-minute blurb from I think I'll attribute it to Clay Travis, if you know who that is. And I didn't think it through. And now that you're pulling up a whole bunch of other things, he only brought up that. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Tennessee and Kansas State shouldn't be there. Sorry, I mean Clemson and Kansas State shouldn't be there. And I got, I guess you could say, riled up, so to speak, for that. I didn't think anything past previous years or the other comments he made in regards to championship games. So here I thought I was going to come with a strong point to your show, and you would say, "Oh, that's great." I didn't think about Clemson and Kansas State, but neither did I past that little 2-minute thing. So I'm going to have to probably come toward your side, Mark. My argument was not thought through and a little bit weak.
Well, anytime anyone criticizes a system, of course, you have to know, okay, what's the alternative? If I'm going to either favor or criticize what's being proposed, then if I think it can be done differently, then what is that and how is that going to play out?
Yeah, that's right. If maybe maybe Clay Travis will reconsider that. I think he was also looking at it. He's a Tennessee fan and trying to make a justification for them being better than Clemson and Kansas State as far as playoff consideration. They beat Clemson pretty handily, so they probably were. But nevertheless, I think he was also trying to find a way to push Tennessee up in the, maybe not in the top 4, but maybe 5 or so. So yeah, you're right. There needs to be. I'm sure the committee, now they think about Mark, or whoever's making these playoff rules by a standard, whatever bylaws or so. I'm sure what we're talking about here, they thought this through thoroughly, and that's why they came up with that instead of, hey, let's just go 1 through 4, and it could be 4 non-conference champs, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to agree with that, Mark.
So basically,
I did a 180. I've done a 180.
Yeah, so basically what the thought process is that we can't have conference championships that mean nothing. Therefore, we got to incentivize the conference championships. Number 2, we can't have 4th and 5th and 6th best teams in conferences playing conference championships and somehow pull off an upset and then undeservedly make it into a playoff. Therefore, you see the disbandment of all these divisions, and we're in the process of seeing that. We saw that with the Pac-12 this past season. We're going to see it with the ACC this season, and expect to see it with the Big Ten when USC and UCLA come on board.
Right, which I'm looking forward to non-divisional football. It's going to be more interesting. But yep, that's a good point, Mark. I've done a 180. I'm on board.
Good stuff.
Mark, I'll say one last thing about the great Charles, with the late Charles Way, I should say. I admit I have no memories of him in college per se. I was 79. I was I guess that would have been my kid. The Rose Bowl would have been I was a kindergartner. Maybe my dad had the game on or so, but I was probably running in and out and didn't pay attention. But I do have some vague memories of him on the Cleveland Browns. He was on some of those early some of the cardiac kid years. I think he came in. I just looked it up in 1980. He played there to 85, although most of injury-plagued seasons.
Yes, number 25.
I do remember my father pointing out. We used to watch the Browns games together, and him saying, because of him, Ohio State lost out on a national championship. He helped them, but at that point, I was already liking him because he was on the Browns, not on USC at that point. So I do have some vague memories of him on the Browns. And I didn't even remember that, but I see he went to the Rams and he was Eric Dickerson's, backup, maybe like 3rd string for a couple years. And they even had one breakout season where he looked like almost a third of his total yardage came in one season.
Okay, that's where I was going next. Is that yes, Charles White did not have a stellar NFL career, but he was the 1987 NFL rushing champion.
Right, and I think I guess they had traded Eric Dickerson at that point, right? Otherwise,
traded him to the Colts.
Right? Yeah, and I went to that playoff game, by the way, and when they played. Remember when the Browns played the Colts?
I remember it well.
Or so. My father brought me along to that game.
38-24,
yeah,
I believe
it was
was
fairly
the final.
one-sided. It was a very cold day. It was a frigid northeastern Ohio winter day, several degrees below zero. My mom made me bundle up for that game. I was actually hot. Had so much, so much bundling on there. But yeah, that's that. I do remember a little bit about the late Charles White as an NFL player. And Mark, you have a lot of calls. I appreciate you helping me see the light as far as the top 4 seeds, and maybe recalling a few things about Charles White. And I look forward to the rest of the show.
Yakov, we appreciate it. And again, those concerns are certainly not invalid because there's no perfect system. That's for sure.
That's right.
All right, Yakov.
Have a good night, Mark.
Thank you so much. All right. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. I do understand from the chat, and I looked it up, that there are some other sad celebrity news coming in tonight. Let's go to our next caller, Joe Long, out there in the abyss. Joe, are you there?
Hey, Mark. How are you? Hey, Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. How are you?
Oh, you can't. Can you hear me, Joe? Mark?
Yes, Joe. We got you.
Oh, good. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you have COVID.
Yes, I have, but we're getting through it.
Good. Jeez. Well, I'm calling because I was listening to you last night, right towards the end of your show, and you were really letting it fly about comparing the Notre Dame Alabama of 2012 game to this blowout that we had. Just this. And so I have some points to make here, and then you can kind of debate me or whatever, because I know it's all that's your opinion and you're entitled to it. But I just wanted you to hear some things about that game. And one of the first things I would say is it was Pac-12 refs. Okay, they hate Notre Dame. And if you go back to watch the start of that game, Notre Dame kicks off to Alabama. Alabama scores. They go down the field and scores, right?
Yep.
So they get the 7-0 lead. Then Notre Dame gets the ball. Eric Golson is the quarterback, and he's a redshirt freshman.
Golson?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Everett Golson. He's a redshirt freshman, and he's he led the team to an undefeated season, including a string of 3 Big Ten defeats. Purdue they beat, and then they beat Michigan State, and then they beat Michigan, I think, all in consecutive weeks. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So my point is, Notre Dame gets the ball after Alabama scores, okay? Pac-12 refs. Do you remember the beginning of it when Golson, he completed a pass for 8 yards to T.J. Jones? Then he went to Tyler Eifert, who was the Mackey winner, best tight end in the game. And he throws the first one, he catches it, but out of bounds. The second one, he caught both feet in, and the refs ruled that it was no catch. And even Kirk Herbstreit, who really doesn't like Notre Dame, said that was a catch. And so did Brent Musburger, who also didn't like Notre Dame.
How do we know that Brent Musburger, Kirk Herbstreit, and Pac-12 officials all hate Notre Dame?
Because I've watched the game for 55 years.
I watch those guys almost every time they do a broadcast as well. I've not picked up on their hatred for Notre Dame.
Well, you wouldn't, because you're not you're not a Notre Dame follower.
Well, actually, that might make me more qualified to pick up on it rather than being a Notre Dame fan.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that would make you more
I tend to think so, but go ahead.
Yeah, no way. But anyway, so he makes the
understand,
catch.
Joe, the point that I'm making is you can take any fan base and they can interpret, and it's been proven a zillion times that they can look at certain plays, they can look at certain
okay, you know what? Go ahead. I'll let you have it.
Well, the point that I'm making,
you know
I'm not
more
saying
than
that,
me about Notre Dame USC. I get it.
no, that's not the statement I'm making, Joe. And I'm not saying this about you because I don't know you and I haven't sat and watched games with you. So I'm not saying this is for sure. I'm just telling you
Okay.
that it's been proven that fan bases are biased.
Okay.
And
I'm
so
willing to let that go. And I
it's
know it's your
easy
opinion.
to think as though everyone's out to get you and that certain factions of the media are against you and they criticize you and they underrate you. I'm not saying that
Well,
you do
you
it,
know,
and I'm
no,
not saying that
but
those
I
guys
guarantee
aren't.
you when
Okay,
I
can I
listen
finish my
to
statement?
sure.
I'm not saying that you do it. And I'm also not saying that Kirk Herbstreit, Brent Musburger, and Pac-12 officials don't hate Notre Dame. I'm just saying that I watch a lot of college football, and
I watch and tape as well.
I have never picked up in any such way that Kirk Herbstreit and Brent Musburger hate Notre Dame.
And Chris Fowler.
Oh, and Chris
But that's
Fowler, he
another
hates Notre Dame as well. Okay.
yeah. And that's fine if you don't believe that.
No, I don't. But
It
go
doesn't
ahead.
matter to me. Okay, so they didn't call that catch. Okay, you should go back and watch, and you tell me if that was
I know
fair.
exactly what play you're talking about.
Was it a catch?
I believe so.
Okay, so that made it. That was a 3rd and 2. They would have had it around midfield, like about the 48-yard line
Okay.
of Alabama, and instead they had to punt. So they punted it down to the 25-yard line, and they called a penalty for catching interference. And the guy that was running down, I think it was Farley, he totally missed. He didn't touch him at all. His own player hit him, and Notre Dame recovered the ball. So this was Notre Dame's first possession to answer back from Alabama, and they wound up getting 2 calls in a row. And Herbstreit said both times, I couldn't believe my ears actually as I played that back, but he was in favor of Notre Dame. They got jobbed, and so was Musburger. Both guys were saying that was a bad call. 2 of them, 2 calls in a row. So, you think about measuring the game that we just saw where it was like a 58-point difference. And then you see Notre Dame, Alabama, where in the second half, Alabama scored 7 in the third quarter. Notre Dame scored 7 in the third quarter. Alabama scored 7 in the fourth quarter. Notre Dame scored 7 in the fourth quarter. And they lost by 4 touchdowns as opposed to 8 touchdowns. So I really don't see how in your brain that you can say that's on the same par.
Okay. You ready for this, Joe?
I am, my brother.
All right. First of all, do you really think that every play in a football game is just as valid as every other play in a football game? Was the first play of Monday's national championship game as important or more important than the last play of that game? Which play would have been more important, the first play of the game or the last play of the game?
I think if you're down 65-7, I think there was more important plays than the last play of the game.
Exactly. So basically, once Alabama put its foot on Notre Dame's throat and kicked their ass more than any championship game I've ever seen in my life, once it got to 28-0 and then 42-0, the
No, it
rest of
wasn't
that
42-0. It was 35-0 and then 35-7.
Okay, 35-0. The rest of that game was inconsequential. Didn't mean anything. I don't care if Notre Dame scored 20 points in a row. It didn't much matter.
Okay, but all I'm saying is when you start the game off and you're playing the best team. I mean, they had Lacey, they had that amazing receiver, they got a good quarterback, McCarron, they got great defense, that all-star that was going against Eifert on that catch. It was an All-American. And yet the first drive for Notre Dame, they take it away from them with 2 successive calls that were bad. So Notre Dame could have had a 1st down and 10 at Alabama's 25-yard line. Now
you
it's
in
only
some way
7-0 at that
insinuating
point.
that Notre Dame had a chance of beating Alabama that night?
Yes, it's only we don't know. It's only 7-0 at that point.
We know.
No, we don't.
We know that the best team in America was playing about the 12th best team in America. That's what we know. There is no way in hell that Notre Dame was anywhere close to being on the same field with Alabama that night. Those two teams were completely different stratospheres.
No, that's not true, because we don't know what would have happened had Notre Dame had
There is no comparison between the 2012 Alabama football team and the 2012 Notre Dame football team. Joe, if you're going to try to argue
was ranked number
Notre
one.
Dame was in that
Notre
game,
Dame was ranked number one because they were undefeated.
Crazy. You are beyond
Notre Dame was
crazy.
ranked number one.
I don't care
Notre
what
Dame
they were
was
ranked. They got their rear ends handed to them.
Well, a lot of
Alabama
people thought they were pretty good, I guess, if they were ranked number one.
If you want to get a true perspective on what that game could have been, Alabama could have scored 70 points. I guarantee if anybody would have gone out there and said to every Alabama player, we'll give you $10,000 if you score 75 points tonight, they would have done it.
Bullshit.
Joe,
they were ranked.
No, that's not, that's not bullshit.
They were ranked number one, so apparently
I don't care what they were ranked.
A lot of people disagree. A lot of people disagree with what you say as being ranked number 12.
You're arguing that they didn't just lose 65-7 because they were number 3?
I'm saying a lot of people think that they were better than ranked number 12 when they played. You say they were ranked number 12. A lot of people thought they were ranked number 1.
What I said. I did not say that they were number 12 in the country. They were an undefeated team. Therefore, they were ranked appropriately.
You said they were the 12th best. What'd you say about 12?
They were not anywhere close to being the best football team in America. Not even close.
Okay, but can you see that there might have been a different kind of vibe to that game had Notre Dame had not gotten those calls against them? That
yes,
even the announcers
that it might have been 35-3 in the third quarter.
It was 35-7 in the third quarter, and then 42-14.
You just confirmed that it was a 35-0 game at one point in the game. Okay, I'll concede that it could have been 35-3. So there you go. Give yourself an extra field goal in that game, and you merely got annihilated, not completely crushed.
That would have been in the first quarter. So the very first drive. So that might have put a whole different mindset.
We've got other calls coming in, but we appreciate you being here. So thanks so much for calling.
All right. Thank you.
All right. We will take our next call here at the Voice of College Football. We got Michael on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing? Sound like you're doing a lot better tonight, sir.
Yes, I am doing better. How are you?
Not too bad. Hey, I have a question for you. Yeah, I know a lot of people didn't like Kevin Warren being selected as big to new commissioner and stuff like that. But in your honest opinion, do you think it was bad timing when he came in 2020? And also, do you think Jim Delaney should have stayed on just to get him through the COVID period?
Well, excuse me. Kevin Warren took the job in June of 19. So we were not anywhere close to knowing that there was a pandemic. I thought it was in 20. Coming.
My fault. I thought it was in 20.
That's what I just read tonight.
Okay.
It was June of 19. I could be, regardless, even if it was June of 2020. June 2020 would have put us in the middle of that. But I read June 19 tonight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you might be right because you are the authority of college football.
Well, I'm sometimes the authority, and other times I got to research like everybody else. So
sure. Oh, and I'm getting a petition started tomorrow. I already got 1.5 million people who's willing to sign up for you to be the next commissioner of the Big Ten.
Well, if we can come up with a good staff around me, I would be willing to take that on. But any good leader, Michael, doesn't know everything. Every good leader surrounds himself with good people.
Great people.
here's so both of these things are true here, Michael. So Kevin Warren was appointed the commissioner of the Big Ten in June of 19, but he did not take office until January of 20.
Yep, I was wondering stuff like that. And I'll say it for you. Everybody, Mark Rogers is not like Notre Dame. Notre Dame's pathetic. That's just me. Anyway, I'm just wondering stuff like that. But on a serious note, would you think Barry Alvarez would be a great fit to be the new commissioner? Or because he's up there in age, he doesn't want to do it, you think?
I don't know what Barry Alvarez's ambitions are. I don't know that he's probably, let's see, Barry Alvarez took the Wisconsin job in 89. That was 43 years ago. He's got to be
89? How many years ago?
That was in 1989. That was 33 years ago, 34 years ago. So he's got to be pushing 70. If not, yeah, I don't know that Barry Alvarez is the best choice at this point.
Who would you like to see?
Oh boy. I don't necessarily, I haven't given it any thought. Somebody who's organized, somebody who's sensible, somebody who's knows kind of marketing and branding, and somebody who's knows how to select great people.
Yeah, like I said, hopefully I get you to be that person. So, but no, I'm just wondering stuff like that. But overall, yeah, there was that was messy stuff like that. But overall, what would you rate Kevin Warren's job in the short time he was commissioner? If you was to give him a letter grade?
Well, I'd give him A's across the board for, I don't know if you were around when I was running through his tenure and what I thought of it. His two great accomplishments are bringing USC and UCLA into the league, and also not just striking a media rights deal, because every commissioner is able to do that to some extent, but he was able to do it on 3 separate platforms with 3 separate media companies. I think it's huge that the Big Ten has partnerships with Fox, NBC, and CBS across all those platforms. And with USC and UCLA on board in 2 years, then they're going to be able to broadcast throughout the day from start to finish. So you can always tune into a Big Ten football game through every time zone. So that's what I think is going to be very big for the Big Ten.
All right. Yes, that's what I'm thinking also. Me, I give him like an A, solid A or A minus and stuff like that. But no, I just want to get your take. I was looking for you earlier today when I seen it this afternoon and stuff. I thought, wait a minute, breaking news, and Mark's not on until now, I guess. I figured you would have been on earlier today when you seen it itself. But
yeah, I've been moving extremely slow this week.
All right. As you should. I'm telling you, it's mandatory. You need to take a staycation. Get away from your computers and stuff. Let us do this stuff. We can do the streams.
We will get there, Michael. We will get there.
All right. Seriously, I hope you feel better soon. Have a great weekend. And thanks for taking my call, sir.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. All right. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We've got our guy, Dr. C, on the line.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. Well, I'm glad that you're doing better with fighting old Uncle COVID.
Yeah. We are getting
yeah,
doing much better than a few days ago. That's for sure.
That's good. I was wondering, that we were looking at the Big Ten commissioner. Obviously the Big Ten is in a really good state, right behind the SEC. How concerning is this for the Big Ten?
Oh, I don't think it's concerning.
Not at all.
Well, it's always concerning if you have little confidence in your ability to hire the next great person. So that's always a wild card. That's always an unknown. Sure. Anytime you lose a person of leadership and they're at the top of the heap, then you've got to replace them, and you were happy with the previous person, then yeah, there's concern. But if they know what they're doing, then they should be able to make a strong replacement. It's funny that I say this about Kevin Warren and that he's gaining some high marks from, it sounds like, yourself and others, because I would not have ranked him highly in the fall of 2020. That's for sure. And I didn't.
Well, no, I just I guess why I hold him in high regard is the TV deals, and the money that's coming in for the Big Ten. I think it's important to keep the balance of power, not where the SEC gets all the money. And I'm an SEC, I'm Razorback and USC fan. So, but having a strong counter conference to the SEC, I think, is crucial. And the Big Ten is the closest thing to that right now.
Yep. Yeah, I don't want to give him too much credit, like he's the only one that could have authored that deal. But at the same time, I want to give him due credit because he was the person on the hot seat and the person responsible for forging that media rights deal, and he pulled it off. And again, I want to consider this to be a much more significant media rights deal than most that are contracted, most agreed upon, because to get 3 of the major media rights holders and coordinate those 3 and get them all on board at the same time and put it all together as one deal. Before, the Big Ten would have its media rights deal with ESPN, and it had its media rights deal with Fox. Now, ESPN had to figure out what it negotiated and signed with one and then with the other, but they weren't connected. They weren't technically connected. Now, the Big Ten, of course, had to have its priorities in play and its strategy in play so that they worked. Those 2 contracts worked together for the Big Ten. But this is a totally different deal when you get all 3 of them together and you negotiate them all together and work it all out together in unison. That's next level.
Yeah. So ultimately, I guess how you would grade a commissioner, is it fair to say on their ability to sign these TV contracts at the end of the day?
Well, money makes the world go round, so that's first and foremost, and that's how these schools and that's how these conferences make the most money, is from media rights. So that's first and foremost, yeah. And then he's got a unique situation on his resume, and that was the pandemic. And that wasn't such a good one. But he also has a unique plus on his resume that is becoming less unique because of what's happened in college athletics in the last 10 to 15 years, and that's expansion. But his was a big plus.
Yeah, and I guess, would it be fair to go after someone that has, not necessarily tied to even college football, but ties to television? Wouldn't that be a plus to get a commissioner that's already friends with the big networks? And maybe has that kind of a pool, basically?
Well, anytime you're hiring somebody that has multiple roles, then you have to figure out, is this person, based on their background, they're giving us benefits in these areas because of their background and their experience, but they don't know about A, B, and C, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So it all depends on what you want to value. I don't think that that's that important.
All right. Well, that's all I got, Mark. But yeah, I just, like I said, I want I love the SEC, but I want other conferences to thrive as well. So
Yeah.
anytime something like this happens, I'm concerned.
Dr. C, I guess the bottom line is the background in television's not important. It's that they understand it, and then they can go and hire people to be around them to help them through that.
Yeah, very true. And I guess the last thing, do you think there'll be more expansion into the Big Ten in the next 4 to 5 years?
Yes. That would be my guess. And that's all.
Notre Dame? You know, any possibility of being Notre Dame?
Probably not.
Yeah.
They certainly didn't go for it this time around, and the Big Ten wanted that to happen. So maybe it's Stanford and some combination of Stanford and Cal, Stanford, Washington, Oregon. Or maybe it's going to North Carolina, Georgia Tech, going that route.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I kind of, like I said, I like regional conferences, and of course that's over. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I hope there's no more expansion or changes in, conferences. But I think that's the world we live in now.
Yeah, if the Pac-12 could pick up, or what's going to be the Pac-10, if they could pick up some suitable replacements, San Diego State, Fresno State, I don't know if that's going to be enough, but then I would be okay with this all standing pat for eternity. But if it's going to continue to be the wild, wild west, I would say that the Big Ten, if I'm the Big Ten, I'm not going to say this for sure, but I'm going to give thought to going after Florida State and Miami.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Recruiting. I would want to be in the state of Florida.
And then there goes the ACC. I mean, who would they replace them with?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I don't think there's anyone left that kind of makes sense unless they go just completely and then go after like Oregon and, kind of like the Big 12. It becomes a Big 12 kind of conference. But yeah, if they lost Florida State and Miami, I mean, that's the end of the ACC pretty much. Unless they keep things together and pick up, I have no idea who they pick up in, Memphis or.
Yeah, well, it's not looking good, but I don't know that it's any weaker than, from a sports standpoint, any weaker than the Pac-12 is going to be without USC and UCLA.
Well, and yeah, but at the same time, you still got, you got Oregon, Washington, Oregon State. That's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
And then everyone else.
The ACC having Clemson, North Carolina, Georgia Tech, Pitt, Syracuse, Louisville, Boston College, etc.
Yeah. Interesting times, Mark. All right. Well, feel better.
Thank you, Dr. C.
Hey.
I appreciate it.
Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
All right. Exploring with Ben showing up. Good to see Ben with us here. We got the real MVP on the line as well.
Hey, Mark. It's good to see you this evening.
Yeah, how are you?
Good. I would like to talk about a general trend that I've been noticing in college football.
Okay.
And that is, Mark, invalidating results on the football field. Is it true that Georgia beat TCU?
Georgia barely beat TCU. Yes.
Is it true that TCU beat Michigan?
They beat Michigan. Yes, they did.
And is it true that Michigan beat Ohio State?
Yeah, we got that all in line. Yes.
Okay. Then how come at 5-6, Alabama's ranked ahead of Tennessee? Now, I'm not a scientist. I don't claim to be an expert on anything. I don't deal with data, but I feel like if you have a head-to-head comparison, one of those teams should be ranked ahead of the other, Mark.
Yeah, because what you just outlined is the dilemma I ran into with my top 25 that actually makes sense. And that's believing that there are teams that are better and even have better resumes than TCU. However, TCU won a playoff game, and they were the only other team to win a playoff game with, maybe they didn't win the Big 12 championship, but they were the number one seed in the Big 12 with the best record in the Big 12. And then they win a playoff game against Michigan, and that kind of lined everybody else behind them. I could have taken the tact that, okay, we're just going to look at resumes and I'm going to forget the head-to-head. And that would have sent TCU catapulting down my list, because then I could have justified, because of their second loss, I could have justified Alabama, Tennessee ahead of them, and I could have knocked them down to about number 7.
Right, and this gets into another point that's been made throughout the show. Now, TCU Michigan's the first one. I understand Michigan made some inaccurate decisions, we'll call it, Mark. But TCU still had to take advantages of those decisions, correct?
Absolutely.
And it's not TCU's fault that Michigan made bad choices, right?
No.
So how come people are penalizing TCU for doing what they're supposed to do? I don't get that. We can't retroactively say, well, Michigan turned the ball over. Michigan made a bad play call, Mark.
Yeah, I am not totally on board with things like turnovers don't count. Like anytime there's a turnover, well, that kind of didn't count and that gets thrown away. So Michigan threw 2 pick sixes. Well, the TCU players had to break on the ball. They had to make the reception. They had to run it for a touchdown. I understand that it's not the same as your offensive line blowing off the ball for 10 or 12 consecutive plays on a 75-yard drive to score a touchdown, but there are unconventional scores in football all the time. And there were also 2 Michigan interceptions in that game where TCU receivers should have clearly caught the ball, and they tipped it right up in the air for Michigan to intercept the ball. So that happened on the other side as well.
Right, and that was kind of where I'm going with it next. Michigan, if they could have able to, they could have picked off TCU and been able to score pick sixes as well, right?
Yeah, I believe it's also available to them too. It's within the rules for them to continue to run the ball all the way to the end zone. Yep.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because from what the information I'm gathering, it makes it seem like only TCU could have been able to score these ways. Maybe this is a crazy idea, Mark, but don't have your quarterback throw interceptions. Has Michigan thought about that, Mark? Do you think they've thought about that thoroughly? Hey, let's throw to the team in white and not the team in purple.
That's part of the game.
Yeah, and
you got to tighten that up too. Yes.
Right. And then you got this caller a few callers ago that was talking about Notre Dame 2012 being able to beat Bama. Mark, if that game is not valid as a valid result, then almost no game in college football is a valid result. Would you agree with that statement?
If we are going to argue that game, then we can argue every game in history. And we can find a way, if we want to watch every play and say, well, if that left guard was better and would have blocked that guy better, then they wouldn't have gained 3 yards. They would have gained 30 yards. And, we can make every game what we want it to be. But, I get Mr. Joe, Notre Dame fan, loves Notre Dame and thinks that they got ripped off and they should have had a play, a reception at midfield that was called out of bounds. Okay, fine. Your team got obliterated. Your team got wiped off the field. I'm sorry that you were the subject of one bad call in the first quarter that might have been resulting in a field goal or something. But At the same time, let's also understand that Alabama called off the Dogs way before that game was over, and who knows how many points they could have scored.
Can you do me a favor and highlight this comment from Michigan man Jason that says, yeah, because JJ's the only quarterback who makes mistakes drill. The point isn't that JJ makes more mistakes than other quarterbacks, even if that's true. But say that's not true. The point is TCU was able to capitalize on those mistakes and convert them into points. That's why we play the game, is to score touchdowns, right, Mark?
Yeah, and the quarterback is part of the game. So if you've got a lousy quarterback that makes mistakes, then that's part of your team.
Right. I would say if your quarterback is more important than any other positions and he makes those mistakes, it only highlights the problem with your team.
You know, I think it's worthwhile to have a conversation about Ohio State and Georgia and what other plays could have been made and all of that. And it's easy to convert that from an Ohio State loss into a win, but the game was fairly officiated and Georgia found a way to win. And the field goal kicker that you carry on your team, he's part of the team as well. And that guy missed a 50-yard field goal. Had he made a 50-yard field goal, then that would have been another component to your football team that was better, that would have enabled you to win the game.
Yeah, you're exactly right. If we're going to argue about people not being able to do their jobs to the maximum potential, then we should just stop playing the sport altogether, Mark. I mean, that's a standard nobody can live up to. I mean, even in the Georgia TCU game, I'm sure Georgia made an error or two because they're human beings. They make mistakes. Now, some mistakes are more egregious than other mistakes, but still, they're still mistakes. Michigan man Jason said, the real MVP, your comment is false. JJ had 6 INTs all year, and 2 was in that game. Well, whose fault is it that he had threw 2 interceptions in that game? That's his fault. Yeah. Or you give credit to TCU for doing a great job.
Yeah. You don't say interceptions against Hawaii.
Right. Maybe, Mark, if Michigan played a better non-conference opponent, maybe they would be able to figure out these issues at an earlier day and time, and it wouldn't have been them in such a big game. Do you think there's some validity to that? Maybe if they played like a Notre Dame or something, maybe they would have been closer in their semifinal game.
Yeah, this is the fallacy of football, and college football in particular, and it makes it great as well, is that they only play one time. We don't get to see Michigan and TCU play 10 times to know, okay, that was crazy. That only happened once. It wasn't going to happen again. While this was valid, and it happens all the time when Michigan and TCU play, and we can't do that. We just have to take the one game for what it is, and we can make all sorts of guesses. I've heard all sorts of guesses that Michigan would have won 8 out of 10 times, and that's all well and good, but they played one time, and that's what it was.
Mark, you know what? To avoid all this inaccurate stuff, how about we just have every playoff game for now on be a best-of-7 series?
Yeah, that would fill up the off season, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like the direction some people want to go with. I mean, I don't think that would make any sense for their health and well-being, Mark, but I can't think of any other reasonable way to alleviate these issues. I just don't understand this at all.
Well, it's basically fan bases of teams that lose games wanting to figure out ways to excuse their team and say that they are better than what they showed in that particular game. And they might be right. It's just not reality.
Well, you're exactly right. But I think other than that, if you want to blame a particular person, I would blame the head coach. That's who I would have blamed in that game. I think they got out-coached by Sonny Dykes. And I think Jim Harbaugh is a man that says and believes he's fully committed to Michigan, but I don't know how you can be fully committed to one place. And then the last 2 off seasons in a row, you're speculated to be at all these other jobs. Like, Mark, if you put all your energy, would it be fair to speculate you weren't putting in 100% energy into this show if throughout the entire time when you're not upload videos, you're doing something completely unrelated to this channel?
Yeah, if I'm not able to keep up with college football news and understand what's going on and do all the other aspects of what is hopefully going to make this a successful channel someday,
Right.
yes.
So if you've got a head coach who last year was reportedly on an airplane during one of the busiest and most important days of the entire college football year, doesn't that, show where kind of the head coach is at?
Yeah, so you're talking about this particular offseason, or are you talking about last year?
Last year, he was on
Yeah.
an airplane, I believe,
Yes, a
to take
National
the
Signing Day.
Vikings job. And this year, he's been speculated for other jobs. And, once I can understand it, but twice is a pattern, Mark. There's a pattern developing with Jim Harbaugh that his full heart, I don't believe, can be in it. I just don't think it can be in it when I'm sure Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Sonny Dykes, all the elite guys are 100% in college football. And I just don't see how Jim Harbaugh can be in that position.
Well, it's not as though we haven't seen head coaches talk to NFL teams and be able to manage both. So your point's well taken. It makes sense. You can't have your mind and your efforts divided, but at the same time, people are able to move on to other jobs and interview and do all those things and either stay where they're at and continue to be successful or not.
Yeah, I get that. Some people have the greatness to overcome that, Mark. But what is Jim Harbaugh's record in bowl games?
It's what, 1-6 now, right?
Yeah, that's not exactly impressive, is it?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I would say that's alarming. Some guy wants to talk to me, Mark. I'm not sure who it is. How to pronounce his name? Would you mind bringing him on?
Oh, we're talking about somebody in the chat.
Yeah, somebody in the back room.
All right, somebody in the back room here. We got TriStar. TriStar, what's going on tonight?
Hey, okay. I mean, I can't take this disrespect to Jim Harbaugh right now. I feel like you guys are just ripping him a new one for absolutely no reason.
What did I say that ripped Jim Harbaugh a new one?
Not you. I'm talking about I don't know what
you guys.
Okay, my fault. I meant singular. I don't know what's your name? Sorry, I don't know what it is.
I'm the real MVP. Nice to meet you, TriStar.
All right. What do you just think Jim Harbaugh's a bad coach, or what's the deal?
No, I don't think he's a bad coach. I think he's a great coach. I think for one game he got out coached by Sonny Dykes, and it happened.
Okay, well, you're saying that he's not fully committed into his job at Michigan after he just took them to the playoff. How does that make any sense?
Well, if you're rumored for other jobs, okay, and last year you were rumored for other jobs, and it was reported you took a plane to potentially get another job. I think it's fair to speculate if that head coach is 100% bought in.
So you think he, after being, you don't think the whole season he was 100% bought in after he just beat Ohio State again and made the playoff again? That doesn't make any sense. You can't make the playoff without being 100% bought in.
You don't see how it could be. You don't see how it could be possible that a head coach who's thinking about taking other jobs isn't bought in at 100%.
Okay, first of all the rumors came after the season was over. That's one thing. And in December, before all these speculations about whether Michigan might have these investigations about them, whatever they did, before that, he came out with a statement that he would be 100% enthusiastically coaching at Michigan. Now, after all those investigations came out, now all these NFL rumors are coming in, and he's obviously talking to NFL teams and stuff. But if you're going to tell me that the entire season he wasn't bought in and somehow made the playoff, and you're going to say that he wasn't bought into the TCU game, and that's what happened, that's why they lost, then that's absolutely ridiculous. They may have lost the game, and he may have had a bad day coaching, but it wasn't because of these NFL rumors, and he wasn't 100% bought into the team. That's just not correct.
Okay. I think I can see where the confusion is, TriStar. The season for me, and maybe for Mark as well, I don't think the college football season ever ends with the transfer portal, the recruiting of players and stuff like that. So I'm talking about right now, he needs to be 100% bought into Michigan.
Well, he just had the number one transfer portal class. So I don't know how that's not 100% bought in.
Well, you can have the number one in something and not 100% be bought in, just to make that clear. But I don't think he has number one. I think he's fallen to number 4 last check.
I mean, regardless, he's probably coming back. That's what I'm hearing right now. So if he comes back, is he now 100% bought in, or is he still not 100% bought in? Because last year people were talking about the exact same thing, and then what did he do after all these rumors happened? He just made the playoff again. So, are you telling me that
he ended up in the exact same location he started the year at, losing a semifinal game? Except this year, I would argue it's worse.
But they made the playoff. There's only 4 teams that can do that.
Is that Michigan's goal, is to make the playoff?
It's not realistic to think that you're going to win a national championship. That's not I don't care who you are. I don't care whether you're Alabama, Georgia, or whatever. You cannot tell me that if you don't win the national championship, it's a failure. That's absolutely ridiculous, because there's only one team that can win it. Making the playoff, that's realistically the goal. The goal is to win your conference, beat your rivals, and to make the playoff. Michigan did all those things. Winning the national championship is a caveat of all those things. Even if you're Georgia, you cannot just expect to win a national championship. If you're that greedy of a fan, that's great that Georgia is that good. But if they would have lost to TCU, you cannot tell me that Georgia just had a failure of a season after making the playoff, winning all their rivalry games, and winning the SEC. That's just winning the national championship. For that to be a failure of a season, that's not realistic, because there's only one team that can win that. And Michigan made the playoffs, so you can't tell me that he wasn't 100% bought in. They made the playoff. That's a good season.
Okay. Maybe failure is a strong word. I'll agree with you. Failure is a strong word, but I'm pretty sure Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. Jim Harbaugh, media days, what would it be, last year, had 4 goals he mentioned. One was to beat Michigan State, beat Ohio State, make the playoffs, and win the national championship. Am I correct in that, Mark?
Yes.
So if Jim Harbaugh states those are his goals for his team, and he doesn't meet his goals, what does that say?
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Let's say Ryan Day would have beaten Michigan, won the Big Ten championship, and lost to Georgia in a close game like he did. Except the only difference with what he did this season, let's say he beats Michigan as opposed to losing it. I'm here to tell you right now that Ohio State fans would not be as big in grievance of this season if he had just beaten Michigan. The issue was not them losing to Georgia in a close game. The issue was back-to-back years of losing to Michigan. If you're saying your 4 goals are to win the national championship, beat your rivals, win the Big Ten championship, whatever, and then the only goal you don't check off is the national championship, that means you checked off 3 out of your 4 goals. That is a successful season. Michigan had a successful season. Even though TCU, that loss, it's a pretty bad loss. They were favored to win, they should have won, but it's still a successful season. And even though he didn't get a national title, that's it's hard for me. That's like you coming second place when your goal was to be the best grades in school, and you got runner-up because somebody else got all A's and took an advanced class that beat you. You cannot say your goal to win the national championship and base everything around that. And if you don't win that, it's just like a failure, because the goal is to be good enough to compete in those national championships year after year after year. And if you don't get it, sure, that's obviously not what you want to do. But if you can get there, if you can give yourself the opportunity by making the playoff and completing your other goals, that is a successful season. So he didn't win the national championship, but he had a good season. And for you to say he wasn't 100% committed and still was able to do that, that doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand how the 100% committed thing. I just don't understand where the confusion is in, because I know for me, now maybe people are different. I can't be 100% committed into something if I'm looking at other places. Now maybe Jim Harbaugh's the exception. I just don't know many people like that, but still. And listen, Michigan's goals are lofty, but they're Michigan. If they don't want to win the national championship, then don't state that as your goal entering the season. Just say, hey, our goal's to go into the playoffs and end up in the same place we were last year.
Well, obviously, everybody's goal is going to be to win a national championship. Everybody's going to want to do that. But, like, it's not something that you can, like, winning a national championship is not something that you can say, if we don't get it, we failed. The fact that he was able to get the opportunity to even get the opportunity to win a national championship means he wasn't non-committed to the season. Sure, he was looking at the Vikings or whatever last season, but after that was done, he was obviously committed enough to make the playoffs. Because I'm telling you, being a coach is a hard enough job. If you're not fully committed, you're not making the playoff. It's quite that. It's pretty simple. So if he wasn't fully committed, he wouldn't have beaten Ohio State. He wouldn't have made the playoff.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about last season. I don't think he was fully committed during that time period. I think he reset himself to be fully committed. But in this current moment, I don't think he's fully committed because he's looking at other places.
Okay, well, so when he comes back, he'll be fully committed and we won't have an issue.
This point about Jim Harbaugh. So the real MVP says that he doesn't believe Jim Harbaugh is fully committed. TriStar says that Jim Harbaugh is fully committed. How are we going to settle the score on that one? We're not. So do we have any other closing comments on either side on this one?
Yeah, I would like to make a correction for the record, Mark, because we're a factual show, right, Mark?
Yes, we are.
Michigan is ranked 6th in the transfer recruiting rankings, according to 24/7 Sports. So taking a tumble there, Mark. They were 1, now they're 6.
Okay, so if he does come back, are you going to still say, oh, he's not fully committed?
I don't know at that current point in time.
Well, you didn't know at that current point in the time when he came back last year, and what did he do? He just made the playoff again.
Right, but so last year when he was looking at other jobs, I didn't think he was fully committed. When he said, I'm going to stay with Michigan, and then I saw how they played on the football field, I thought they were committed. Mark, I'm sure you remember, I even said, I believe it was to a Michigan fan, that I thought Michigan looked better than Ohio State before they played, right? You remember that? So I think Michigan can be bought in again. It's just, for me, if I was the athletic director or a coaching staff for some of these players, it would be exhausting to me to constantly hear my head coach be in these rumors.
Well, I mean, when he's constantly bringing you to where you want to be, I don't see the issue. And if on a yearly event we have this, but every single time he gives me the opportunity to win a national championship, why would I complain?
Well, I guess it just depends where your goals are at. If Michigan goals are to have a chance to be in the playoffs, then they're fine.
How many teams win a national championship every year?
Over and over.
Yeah, I know. I don't have anything new to say, Mark. I guess I'll head out. It was good talking to a Michigan man.
All right, TriStar. Is there anything else that you wanted to hit on before you say goodnight?
Well, I want to hear your thoughts.
Okay, here are my thoughts on this. It's Jim Harbaugh's right to interview for other jobs. My issue with what he's done both this offseason and especially last offseason was he needs to be more exact with his words. He needs to understand that he cannot state things and then have it be obvious based on the way things play out that he wasn't necessarily telling the truth. You know, he unnecessarily states things. He doesn't need to state those things. All he needs to do is say that I love Michigan, I love coaching here, and that's pretty much where he needs to leave that. He can't make any empty promises about that he's committed to Michigan if that's not the case. So
I would agree.
That's been an issue. But in regards to his commitment, I have no doubt that Jim Harbaugh loves being the head coach at Michigan. And if somebody was going to ask me what coaches love their schools more than any, I wouldn't know to answer that, as no one would. But if I were to guess, Jim Harbaugh would be near the top of that list. I know that he loves the University of Michigan. That's obvious. He went to school there. He played there. His idol in life, besides his father, is Bo Schembechler. So he is both doing something that he wants to do, but he also has interest in going back to the NFL, and both can be true. So the only thing that I kind of question and find interesting is, why is he the only guy? The last time I remember hearing about a big time major college coach being connected to an NFL job was Lincoln Riley and the Dallas Cowboys. Other than that, what is going on with these other major college coaches? Are they just not, is the NFL just looking at its own for candidates, and Jim Harbaugh is the only college football coach that they're looking at? So why is his name always out there and nobody else's?
I mean, I think Jim Harbaugh, I've always thought, ever since, Jim Harbaugh got there, that he would eventually leave and go back to the NFL. So I mean, he obviously wants a job there. That's why he looks there every time. And it's also because, he's had success there. His stint at 49ers was pretty good. So I think those two particular reasons he wants in, and I'm sure he gets people who want him there too. So I don't know why any other coaches haven't, but I know that's probably why he's always in the mix.
Like, we don't hear Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, fill in the blank, Lincoln Riley's talking to the Broncos and talking to the Panthers and talking to whomever else. Like, we don't hear that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, to be fair, Nick Saban's NFL run did not go the best.
Well, it wasn't bad. Like that, that gets completely overblown. But anyway.
Oh, I don't really remember. I don't even remember him in the NFL, to be fair.
Coached 2 seasons, he went 8-8 and 7-9. People talk about it like he, didn't win a game. All right, TriStar, I appreciate you being here.
Wait, I was gonna say one thing. I think you said the TCU the Michigan interceptions that they got in TCU were 2 drops. I think one of the 2 was Junior Colson broke up the pass, and then it got tipped up to Rod Moore, and he got the diving interception. I think that was one of the interceptions.
Okay.
I also do think there's I obviously TCU deserved to win that game. No, I'm not taking any credit. I do think there's a difference between pick sixes as opposed to just regular interceptions as well.
Well, yeah, there is a difference.
Yeah, but that's all I want to say.
One of them produces points and the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
All right, TriStar.
All right, peace.
Have a good night. All right, 2 callers on the line. Let's get to them. We got Nick on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Nick. How are you? Okay, Nick's gone. Now we got Zachary on the line. Zachary.
Hey, how you doing, Mark?
I am doing just fine. What's going on tonight?
Oh, I'm just sitting around thinking about these Georgia Bulldogs fans, and you know what? I want to give a congratulations to them. They deserve that win. They had dominated performance. 65-7. That was a boring game, but
yeah, it was a boring game.
I do want to, check these Georgia fans, and all these Georgia fans are saying three-peat. I do not think it's going to be that easy to three-peat against a great competition. Alabama's going to be good. Tennessee's going to be good again. I think it's going to be very hard for these three-peat that these Georgia fans are delusional about. What I want to get your opinion on that.
Well, they're delusional if they think it's just automatic. Then they don't really understand the difficulty of football and all the variables that can go wrong. But if they're just believing that they can three-peat, then certainly, yeah, Georgia's right now got the best program in the country. And just about every contending team is not bringing back its starting quarterback. So Georgia's in that same boat, but just about everybody else is as well. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State not bringing back starting quarterbacks. USC is, Oregon is, Michigan is. But Georgia's got the best roster in the country, and Alabama's right there as well, and Ohio State probably in third place.
Yeah, it's just people made fun of Tennessee because we had a little celebration when we beat Bama, and they said enjoy the win, enjoy the win. And now Georgia is doing the exact same thing about, oh well, we're going back to back to back. And I mean, I hate to say this, but the only reason that they might even have a chance to do that is because they'll cupcake schedule
Yeah,
of
I'm looking at it right now. They don't have a tough non-conference game. They've got UAB, Ball State, and the openers against
Tennessee State, I believe, or Tennessee Martin.
Yeah, you got Tennessee Martin, Ball State, and UAB along with Georgia Tech is the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, I mean the only people that can get them fits is probably Tennessee, Ole Miss, and who knows what Hugh Freeze will do at Auburn. But those are the three games I will watch out for. Might have a chance to lose, but I just don't see them win the national championship again this year. But I just want to get that off my chest. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks, Zachary. Call back anytime.
All right.
All right. We will give Nick another shot here at the Voice of College Football. Nick.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing good. Sorry about that before. I hit you're doing StreamYard now, which is different from you taking phone calls. I hit the wrong button here.
No worries.
Up top. But yeah, that was an interesting Michigan back and forth you were having there a little bit earlier. What's your overall opinion with this Jim Harbaugh situation going on with Michigan? Have you ever seen this before in college football? Back-to-back conference champion at odds with the university, flirting with the NFL? Or is that just Jim Harbaugh being Jim Harbaugh?
Well, this many times I've not seen this. This is almost every off season with him. And that's what I'm not understanding. I understand that he is unique to college football in that he has a great NFL record and nobody else. He's got a completely unique coaching resume within college football right now that only Pete Carroll can match, and he's obviously already in the NFL. So he's got the fourth best winning percentage in the history of the NFL. So he's been successful. So an NFL team would know, have a high level of confidence that he would be successful again. And maybe he is the only coach in college football recently that's being pursued like this. If not, then others are able to at least have the conversation with NFL teams and keep it hush hush. And he is not. So there's really only one issue I've got with Jim Harbaugh throughout this process of the last 2 years in particular, and that's that he has made statements that are bogus and not true. And they were unnecessary statements. He wasn't pinned to the wall. He could have just been more generic in his statements, but he has pledged his allegiance to Michigan, made the statement last year that, I'm a Michigan man. This is never going to happen again. This is the end of my interest with the NFL. Well, no, it's not. Here we are 12 months later. You're doing the same thing.
Yeah, but that's called contractual negotiations. So like leverage flips. And when he didn't get the Vikings job, when he expected to get it, leverage flipped back to Michigan. Well, now that he went 13-0, which I'm pretty sure nobody predicted he would do, including you, now he has a lot of the leverage. And then he went out and hired an agent, which he didn't have as much, or he didn't have that before. So now the NCAA comes down with these bogus allegations and all this clown show stuff, but he's still winning at a level that 99% of the population involved in college football said he couldn't do, especially back-to-back. So now he has that leverage, and people don't expect him to wield it. Like, what is Michigan going to do? Are they going to fire him? You're going to fire Jim Harbaugh?
Well, of course they're not.
But that's on Ward Manuel. If he didn't want Jim Harbaugh to do this again, he should have negotiated a contract that was in better interest of Michigan to prevent him from doing this.
Well, he's a college coach. His opportunity and the ceiling on his negotiations and his ability to earn money is higher in the NFL. So if I'm Michigan, I am not paying him outside of the fair market price to keep him as head coach. I'm not doing that.
What's the price tag on a college coach who, like you just said, it's extremely rare for a college coach to have a successful track record in the NFL. So with that considered, what is the amount of money per year that you would pay a head coach to compete for national titles?
Well, that is to Jim Harbaugh's credit. That's not to Michigan's benefit, though.
But that's the situation that Ward Manuel's in right now.
Exactly. If I'm Michigan, I could care less what Jim Harbaugh's success rate in the NFL is. That doesn't help me. I would rather have Kirby Smart or Dabo Sweeney, who is solely successful in college, and I don't have to deal with this every year.
You can't get those guys, though, as Michigan.
Absolutely. Well, we don't believe so. No. So
okay, but you have a coach right now who is your head coach, who is giving you an opportunity to compete for national titles.
Yes. So what does he want? So here's the deal. This is the only point where I side to a certain extent with Jim Harbaugh and can see that he's holding some kind of grudge. And that's that he was hired. He outperformed the expectations early on. He lifted this to a 10-win team immediately, and they were riding the trajectory up. And then it stalled, and he couldn't get past Ohio State. He couldn't win the Big Ten, but he was still winning 9 and 10 games a year. And so they put up with that. But, it's not like it happened for 15 years. It was for a few years. And then he hits this 2020 season where he goes 2-4. And they slash his salary in half and force him to prove his worth. That's where I would have taken exception if I was Jim Harbaugh. I'd say, "Are you
Any
kidding me?"
reasonable person would.
I've had one bad season, and it was a half a season. It was a 6-game season, and all craziness was going on in this country, and it was hard to, the results were only so valid. Why are you doing this to me? Now, if I have a bad season next year and I go 5-7 or 7-5, sure, I get it. But why am I being penalized? And so he immediately lifts them to the playoff. He gets his old salary reinstated. That's the one place where I side with Jim Harbaugh, is that I think he was unjustly cut in salary. And that's both, hurts him financially. Not that he needs the money, but it hurts him financially. And number two, it's out in the open for everyone in college football to know. So it makes him look bad.
It makes him look bad. Why?
Well, I don't mean it makes him look bad. I mean that everyone knows his business. Everyone.
What do you mean everyone knows? I'm not following.
That if let's say my former employer didn't like my my work performance, but they were going to keep me anyway and kind of put me on a probationary standpoint. And they slashed my salary. Nobody's going to know that. Only that's between me and the employer. But because of the nature of the job, everyone knows everybody's laundry and everybody knows what's going on in Michigan between Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. So the embarrassment of him being put out there and having his pay slashed in half is out there.
Well, and that's one of my biggest points. Your pay slashed in half. In half, 50%. How many people would still stay with their employer if their employer said, well,
based on Jim
think
Harbaugh's
you're worth
interest,
half.
Based on his interest in the NFL, I'm guessing he wouldn't have stuck around, but he had no choice.
Yeah, but I mean the NFL last year didn't give him a. Anyway, we can keep going down this road, but I just think people on a large scale are kind of out of their britches a little bit. I don't think people understand how contractual negotiations and with leverage, how that goes. I understand why, and I'm a Michigan fan, say that first and foremost, but people who think like we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars in a high leverage industry with billions on the line. Do we really not think that this is going to be cutthroat? And the second that another party gets that leverage, that they're not going to use it to its fullest extent? I mean, if people can't accept that, then don't be a part of it. Like, it is what it is. It happens. It's cutthroat. But
see, I don't know what Jim Harbaugh wants out of this.
I think what he wants, number one, I think from what I've read on different message boards, I think him and Ward Manuel, I think he's ticked off that he got a 50% decrease in his salary, publicly humiliated by Ward Manuel.
Well, that was my point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I never disagreed with that. But I think now you have other issues inside the program. You have Ward Manuel, who, if you look at his track record, which I know you're a college football fan, but if you look at what he's done inside of Michigan, he, in my opinion, is a failure of an athletic director. And I don't think Jim Harbaugh trusts him. And the NIL issue at Michigan stems back to Ward Manuel. They have plenty of money to funnel through the pipes, and Ward Manuel is being this. He's trying to be Jesus in the flesh, saying this pay for play isn't what we do, which is complete garbage nowadays. And there's a disconnect there. And I think Jim Harbaugh he wants to feel the love from Michigan. I think he likes Michigan. I think he wants to stay at Michigan. But I also think, like you said before, he's one of the rare individuals who has the ability to coach in the NFL and have success in the NFL. And he's always going to have interest from the NFL because of that. So he's going to use that leverage as anybody would if they were smart in contractual negotiations based on their skill set. So anybody who thinks that this is it may be an unusual situation, but it's not an illogical situation. We don't see it very often, but if it were in my hands, I would fire Ward Manuel because he's a clown. And I've heard some things. I'm not going to state it, but I've seen and heard some things. The way that Michigan athletics has been under his watch has been nothing short of a disgrace. And anyway, I'm not going to go on too much of a rant, but one of the other things I wanted to get to was, why do you think that paying a coach? Okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that paying a coach $15 million a year to compete for national titles, do you think that's unreasonable?
Well, if you're just looking at the economics of how much prestige, how much money, attention, enrollment, all the benefits of having a national championship caliber football program brings to the university, then it's not unreasonable. You know, would you rather, if you're giving me the option between paying a particular head coach $10 million and finishing in the top 5 in the country every year versus actually making it all the way through, winning the national championship at $15 million a year, yeah, it's worth that extra $5 million.
Well, I mean, we're going back to, okay, one team can win the national title. There's no college team on the face of the planet that can say, if you don't win the title, that's not good enough. You have to just be competing, like be in the competition. You need to be in that range, realistically.
Well, there's not a hard and fast answer to what you just said, because I totally get what you just said. And it was stated by a few callers ago, that yes, there's only one national championship, and to demand that that be the goal every year, and if it's not reached, then that's a failure, is utterly ridiculous and absurd. However, if you are Oklahoma and your goal is to, win the Big 12, go to the playoff, win a national championship, and you've been in that range over and over and over, and it's now 22 years since you did that, then, if you had the same coach in play during that entire time, it would be reasonable to say, okay, you haven't done it.
Would you pay that coach 15 in the market that we have now? Would you be willing to fork over $15 million a year for that?
I would rather.
How much does
these guys are all like in the $9 to $12 million range? Isn't
okay,
Harbaugh?
But that's going to go up, though. That's going to go up.
Yeah.
With the new deals being made, TV deals.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to go up. I'll just flat out say, I don't think it's unreasonable to compete for national titles year in and year out if you know that you have a head coach who can do that. Why wouldn't you just bite the bullet and pay him $15 million a year? Because my bet is that 10 years from now, that might actually kind of seem like a deal.
Yeah, but you also may shell out more money by $4 or $5 million per year than any other school in the country, and be sitting here 5 or 6 years from now with no national championships.
And but at least you're in the picture, and who cares? As long as you're in the picture, if you have because I'm talking about, like, maybe I should have clarified this. I'm talking about schools like Ohio State, Michigan, people with some of the richest alumni bases, and in conferences that are going to be making $80 to $100 million a year. What's $4 or $5 million? That's cents on the dollar. You're willing to let that coach go and potentially completely crater your program over a few million when your program's going to be hauling in a minimum of 80, 90 million a year? That just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, Nick, we appreciate the call.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for calling. Appreciate it. Yeah, Nick makes some good points. I think we've beaten that subject into the ground. All right, folks, appreciate you being here, the Voice of College Football. We will continue to deliver our conference rankings that I hope you will get into. We're going to continue those. We release the ACC and the Big 12. Please check those out. And we've got coaches rankings, and we've got our evaluation of first-year head coaches, and then the new hires that have just been made, and a whole lot of other stuff right here at the Voice of College Football. And we will see you soon. Appreciate the support, and good night.